Bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today is Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, but you already knew that. You knew that. Help support the show. Get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. 2 ways to get them, 2 shirts. The links are below. Get a Game Changer membership. You can get just a t-shirt. Both are autographed and both include shipping. So get your membership today. Get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. Last night, Douglas Grunther was on the show with us. An amazing conversation. The Quantum and the Dream. It was just so good. And tonight, Hans Dietrich is finally here with us. Now, I've called this show The Magic of Symbols, and we will get into that. But he's traveled the world, and he's into ancient mysteries. He's a great author. I've known him for a long time. And tonight is going to be an amazing conversation. So we've got a lot to cover tonight with Hans. Tomorrow night, Dr. Diane Hennessy is with us. She's a neuroscientist. That's right. So tomorrow night, that means we are going to talk about your brain. That's right. Neuroscience and you tomorrow night with Dr. Diane Hennessy. And then Thursday night, it's my birthday. That's right. We're going to celebrate it together. All of you, we're just going to kick it. AMA, AJA. I'll show off a bunch of my birthday gifts. Yeah. What got sent to me? What got dropped off at the house? What kind of friends drove by and hit me with something? So, we'll do all of that on Thursday night. It is my birthday. Okay. Now, coming up next month, I'm heading down to Peru with Brien Foerester. That's November 15th through the 27th. Links for that are below. It's sold out, last minute cancellation, and you want to get on the waiting list, you can certainly do that. And check out all of Brian's other tours. The links up for that are below. And then after that, February 7th through the 10th, 2025, I am hosting the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles at the LAX Hilton. This is the biggest conference in the world. I've been hosting it for a very long time, and I've said it. I'm going to say it again. This may be the biggest and best yet, and that says a lot for a conference of this size. The links, tickets, information, all the current speakers, lineup, schedule, everything is below. Click on ConsciousLifeExpo.com. And then after that, Rise of the Guardians, I'm heading out to Sedona, Arizona. That rhymes, Sedona, Arizona, March 29th through the 30th, 2025. Again, the links for that are below. I've got some hosting duties, but I'm also going to do a presentation, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So come and hang out with us in Sedona, Arizona. I'm wondering if I'm going to get some sky watching in. Yeah, come and hang out with us in Sedona. All right, tonight. I wanted to say this really quick. I was going to mention this to Hans, but I'll say it to you guys. So Hans and I are sound checking, and we wrap, and I everything's cool. And I stand up, and I heard this loud rumble. Something is taking off outside. And this happens to me all the time. It's loud, right? And you run outside expecting to see something crazy, and I never do. It's already gone. It was loud, too. It was really, really, really cool. So often out here, with Skunk Works and everything else, and Northrop Grumman and the Mojave Spaceport, it's usually during the day. You don't hear much at night, but sonic booms, and they're loud. Everything shakes. The house shakes. Everything shakes outside. The ground rumbles. Boom! But you never see it. You only hear it. So I thought I'd share that with you. It happened right before showtime tonight. Hans Dietrich is with us. We're going to talk about, and I saw this in the chat, and it did pop up. Nepal, of course, we're going to talk about Nepal, very magical place. Growing up in Nepal, he's written 3 books. We're going to talk about all of those, Egypt and the Dropa Stones. We'll cover that too as well. He's a world traveler. He's a researcher. He understands the esoteric and occult symbolism. Raised in Kathmandu, Nepal, he possesses a unique insight into ancient wisdom. And we're going to do all of that and much more tonight with Hans Dietrich. I'm very excited about this. I'm going to bring him straight in. Hans, good evening. Finally, right?
Finally, seriously. This is so amazing. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for having me on. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the deal. So let's get this out of the way first. First time guest disclaimer, which has another disclaimer tied to it. I put this show together for years. This is a long time coming, but you still get the first time guest disclaimer, as strange as that seems to be, even for the two of us to say. But Hans, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends, and where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, it ends. But we're going to end as friends. Now you have to accept. First off, we're already friends. Second, we know what we're doing tonight and all of that. But you have to accept so we can move forward.
Oh, for sure. I'm there.
Oh,
I'm on the couch with you, my friend, for sure.
Yeah, right
You're
on
my couch. I'm not on your couch. You're on my couch.
Yeah, and that's also the beauty of what you do, not only in writing books and traveling the world, but you assist other presenters and people. Yes. and that's what you do. You give back to the community, and I really dig that. Last year, when I was down in Peru with Brien and I were somewhere having lunch.
Bless
and your name,
Brian, good friend, good researcher, yeah.
And your name comes up, right? And it's not about what you think. We were talking about the artwork, the posters, right? Or something along those lines. And then I go, wait a minute. Hans is Hans, right? And he goes, yeah. How many times have you had him on the show? And I go, I haven't, but we've talked about it. But I didn't know your Hans was my Hans. He goes, no, man, he's my Hans. So isn't that? I didn't make that connection. I always
known Brien for years. I lived in Maui when he had just left Maui to go to Peru. And so one night I get this call, Hans, I need you to help me out. I know you do graphics. I want you to do my book covers. And so I started designing Brian's book covers. And then all of a sudden I'm designing tour posters for Hidden Inca Tours. And he invited me down in 2014, which was amazing. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. Obviously, I go into a lot of my research with my BS meter in the red and a couple hundred questions. And I'd seen a lot of Peru through Ancient Aliens and other documentary stuff that David Hatcher Childress had also done. So I was incredibly fascinated. All right, I'm going there, 2014. So I went down there and I was blown away. My BS meter was completely shattered. I had 1,000 questions.
Isn't Peru, you, no matter how prepared you are for it,
oh,
right?
Blew my mind. Yeah.
You're not, no. And I love Egypt, and I've been there a couple of times, and other places around the world. Yeah. Peru is nuts.
Once you get out of Lima, you get up into Cusco. Yeah, you're in high altitude and rarefied air, whatever. But the sights you're seeing up there are unbelievable. And it just to be there in the field is amazing. I mean, you can be an armchair tourist all you want on the internet, but if you actually go to these sites, it's quite profound. It's very amazing. And
yeah, it is. And one last, we'll circle back to Peru later on in the show.
Sure.
but Peru, the crazy part about it, and I say this over and over again, but I don't think people understand. Stuff is everywhere you look. It's everywhere, man. Driving down a road,
Oh,
and
what's
yeah,
that?
it's just like, what? It's crazy. And Egypt has got a lot of stuff, for sure. But
And
and
it's all
it's
site oriented. Peru, like you said, it's all over the map. You're in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden, what is that?
it's nuts,
Yeah,
man. It's crazy. It's crazy. So let's back up a little bit here.
for
I
sure.
do want to I do want to talk about Nepal. Nepal. My daughter's name Nicole. I want to talk about Nepal because much. I mean, for millennia now, so much has been put into the magic and the majesty of that area. But to grow up there, did you understand where you were and its meaning to the planet?
It really took me a lot growing up there. Where do I even start? So I lived in Nepal from the age of 4 until I was 19. Um, I lived in the States 2 years in Pullman, Washington, because my father got a job at Washington State University. And then 2 years after that, I lived in Washington, D.C. And then I went back to Nepal. And my 11th grade year, I lived in Calgary, Alberta. So, but the majority of my upbringing from 4 to 19, I lived in Kathmandu, Nepal. I really saw it as a gift and a curse. The gift is you see the world for what it truly is. I went to an international school, 320 students, K through 12, 72 nationalities. So you're one tight knit family of international students. I'm considered what they call a third culture kid. So you're born to one culture, you're raised in a second culture, and through that, you experience multiculturalism. But coming back to the States, nobody's traveled, especially when I came back. I mean, the internet hadn't even been invented at that point, and so there wasn't a lot of understanding about travel, and so it was definitely this gift and a curse. I started looking at it more as a gift later on in my life because, as you say, Nepal is an amazingly magical wonder. In the 1950s, it was a 15th century nation. So since then to today, it has spent 70 years in rapid fire catching up to the 21st century, which has been amazing to watch. I've seen every government you can imagine come through and go. And all of them failed. You see a lot of things that happen through a caste system even. Growing up, especially in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of influx where they will come into Nepal and they will hire a lot of the Nepalese to go to Dubai or Abu Dhabi or places in the Middle East to build, these 5-year communities that they're there for. They will build a new housing community or other construction. And so it's interesting to watch when they come into Nepal. They're like, hey, do you want to go to these, different areas? And most of the upper class or caste system are like, no, we've got hotels, we've got casinos, we've got all these things. Why would we want to go work for you in Dubai? And so the little rock crusher on the road is like, oh my God, I have nothing going for me in my life. I'm an untouchable. Of course I'll sign up for this. Of course I understand it's a five-year indentured, servitude of sorts. And so they go to Dubai and they spend 5 years, maybe 10 years, and then they come back to Nepal and they're building gated communities. They're building all these things that they were used to building in Dubai. And they come back to Nepal as millionaires in Nepalese standards because they made a really massive amount of money in Nepalese standards in Dubai. And so the upper caste is going, what's happening? Why is all this shifted? And so it's been so interesting to watch in the course of my lifetime such a dramatic shift across so many different avenues, caste system, political system, financial systems, all of this. And so Nepal is definitely this magical spot. Not only is it the size of California, there are 42 sub dialect groups that live within Nepal. 2 or 3 of them have very similar languages, but most of them are all different language groups. And then you have everything from the jungles of India all the way to the massive mountains of the Himalayas, all within that width of California. And so, wow, what an amazing experience to see all of that and just, take it in. We see it in the movies, but we don't understand it. Obviously, you've got to go there and you've got to experience it. So
Yeah, and
that's
the
that's
culture, you're talking about thousands of years old,
yes,
right? And just and to be around and exposed to an established culture, you go from there. I think you said Seattle or whatever,
I
you
live in Portland, Oregon now.
or
Yeah,
Portland, same thing,
yeah,
same thing.
same thing.
So you go from Kathmandu to Portland, that is barely 100 years old, no
Right.
established anything, right? No cultural foundation. Now, I love my country. I'm not suggesting any, but when you see that dichotomy, that difference, it's kind of shocking, isn't it? Because you have the established, thousands of years of culture, that is the foundation of Kathmandu and Nepal,
Yep.
and then to get off a plane in Portland, it's like what, right? It must have been a big shock.
It's what we call reverse culture shock. And so the culture shock is going overseas and going, oh my God, I'm now living in this ancient culture. But the reverse obviously is coming back and going, oh my God, where I've been living is so primitive compared to this ancient culture. Yeah.
Yeah, is there a McDonald's now in Kathmandu?
No, there never will be.
Yeah.
If there ever is going to be one, I will never go there again.
I was just up in Canada a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things, Sitka and Skagway and Juneau, by the way,
where my family's from, yeah, my
the tour guides were very proud in repeating. I mean, this is different ports of call. And we have no fast food here, right? that used to be a McDonald's. It got no business, and we drove by it. Right, it's closed. Right? When does a McDonald's shut down? Well, and they were very proud of that up there. That everything is just localized. They have a couple of things. I think there's a Costco in Juneau. It's about this big, by the way.
I've been there.
Yeah, right. You know the one I'm talking about. And but yeah, to drive around those towns and not see that symbolism, right, peering at you. It doesn't exist. But you go to Giza, right?
Oh, it's
and
there.
Look
it's
across
right
the street.
Across the street from the from the Sphinx's Pizza.
There's a KFC. Yeah, there's a Pizza Hut. It's like, oh man. So okay, so now let's shift gears a little bit. I want to stay locally in the area and talk about China and the Dropa Stones.
Sure.
And I'm going to make this comment first. When I back with the internet 1.0. Now I'm going
1.0.
I'm going 1993 here, 1994.
Oh, yeah. 1.0
okay?
for sure. Exactly.
Yeah. And so whatever Alta Vista or Mozilla, some search engine comes out, and excited about that and get it.
Web crawler.
Yeah, web crawler. Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, one of the first things I'm searching UFOs, and there was a lot of UFO content back then, believe it or not. There was a lot of really cool stuff. Anyway, I stumble across, and there was thousands of websites, not billions, right? It was so, it was, anyway, I find a website about the Dropa Stones. And I was like, what are the Dropa Stones? And so that was my exposure to this. And over the years, I read the original accounts, the original stories, the version, the Chinese investigation going into this, and the museums that had or didn't have, and the images of the stones. By the way, the images that I saw in 1993 are still like the only images that exist that are out there that I can find. But there's a huge mystery here. Now, you wrote your book, but I don't know if I want to get to the end of the story first. What do you think ultimately is going on here? Or do we start at the beginning, and where did your interest start with it?
So, wow. Unknowingly, my interest started with my thesis study in Bhutan. So I went to Nepal in 1998 for a 6-month internship at a graphic design studio. Basically, they printed all the billboards around Kathmandu, Pokhara, Mugling. These were local businesses, cigarette companies, alcohol companies, so on and so forth. But I was really waiting for a 2-month special access visa to Bhutan. My father worked in Bhutan at the time, and so he was able to figure out how to grant me special access permission. And what I mean by that is this. Okay, so in 1998, this is the year we're talking about, Bhutan was impossibly difficult to get into. You would basically apply for your visa, and if they accepted you, then you would be invited to come to Bhutan. Your visa was $300 to $600 a day. Yeah, that doesn't include transportation, room, or board in the country. That's just your visa of entrance and whatever gifts you buy. And you were allowed 10 days, and they only allowed 2,000 tourists a year. Sadly, MTV went there like in 2000, so it was like 2 years later, and they brought Nas or somebody, and they destroyed that whole aspect of tourism there. And so now they allow about 20,000 tourists a year, which is a lot greater, but still at a high cost. They only allow you 10 days. You're allowed to go from Paro, where you land, to Thimphu, the capital, and from Thimphu, it's like a 12-hour drive to Bumtang, and that's it. That's all you're allowed to see. So I was granted special access permission to see a lot of the Lakongs and Zongs, which are the local monasteries, for my thesis study. And so I was studying Buddhist cultural mysticism, ancient art, and architecture of Bhutan. And the ancient art is the key factor here, because this art is older than anything that you find in Tibet right now. Because in 1950, China invaded Tibet, destroyed a lot of the monasteries, a lot of the ancient art. And so the remaining Buddhist art is in Bhutan. And some of it's 800 years to 1,000 years old. There's ancient art, and they can't display it with modern lights because it would just destroy it. And so they use butter lamps. So that was kind of my introduction to Bhutan. And while I was there, I saw this group of nomadic people that they called the Drokpa. And I didn't think anything of it. They're all 4 foot and tall. They speak a language called Shina, which is nothing to do with Tibetan or Nepalese spoken in Bhutan. And they're nomadic from far eastern Kham Tibet, which is now central China, through Bhutan, all the way through Ladakh, Kashmir, to the Caspian Sea, and to the Black Sea regions. Their name transliterates from Dropa to Zopa to Drokpa to Brokpa across the region. And they were very instrumental in bringing a very magical form of Buddhism to Bhutan, called Nyingmapa Buddhism. This is where we get all the stories and legends of levitating monks, pushing objects up mountains, blowing horns, astral projection, and ascended Tulku masters, and even the stories of Mount Meru. This all comes out of Nyingmapa Buddhism. But most Buddhism does not talk about this. And so finding this out while I was in Bhutan was very fascinating. So a couple of years ago, a friend of mine, well, somewhat, challenged me to discover more that I could about the Dropa Stones and their origin. And so I started looking back through them. Everything you find online is literally, I'm sure you've discovered, the same story repeated over and over and over again. It's very short. There's not a lot of information there. And so, again, going into my research with my BS meter in the red and 100 questions, I wanted to find out as much as I could about this. And so I started researching where are the origins of the Dropa Stones coming from, and I stumbled across a video I had watched around 2004, 2005, coming off the History Channel. It's called UFO Files, and there was one documentary that talked about the Dropa Stones. And most of what we find online comes literally out of the pages of this documentary. And so it's interesting. Richard Dolan is one of the researchers in it, Hartwig Hausdorff and David Sereda. And so I find it interesting that I'm going to be speaking at Conscious Life Expo in February, and David Sereda is going to be there as well. So
Yeah, David's going to
I
be
would
there, man.
love to pick his brains on this. So,
I'm pretty excited about David Sereda being there. Anyway, so okay, so back to this. So you see the documentary.
So I watched the documentary and I started realizing that everything that we see online comes out of this. And at the end of it, they're like, oh, there's a bunch of different hoaxes possibly going on here. The story might not be logistic. There's another story involved with it called, I have it on my bookshelf here. I've read it several times, Sun Gods in Exile. But the author came out 20 years after the book was published in 40 Times and claimed it was a hoax. I mean, there's so many different ties to the research here that I could go down. And so I did. And I'm like, I really want to find out where all this storyline came from. And the majority of it that I discovered comes out of, from the documentary, 3 magazines. So the first is called Vegetarian Universe, or Das Vegetarische Universum, out of Germany. The second is the Belgian UFO Bulletin, and the third is Sputnik Magazine. These all come out in 1962. The fourth is, of course, Eric von Daniken's first edition of Chariots of the Gods. And so, my God, all right, well, I've watched this documentary, I've gone through all this research. Let's look into all these different publications. Well, I've looked high and low. I have not been able to find a single article, edition, publication date of anything related to Vegetarian Universe. Same thing with the UFO Bulletin from Belgium, 1962.
And then you have
Same,
Sputnik, right? It was
same
published.
with Sputnik. Sputnik Magazine has the most amazing online archive. You can find PDFs from 1960 all the way to today. Every single edition has been archived in one language or another. Nothing from 1962. So, all right. Hey, Eric Van Daniken's, Chariots of the Gods. Let's go there. Not a single reference to the Dropa Stones in that either. But this is what these researchers are telling us in this documentary. This is where this comes from. So I'm like super skeptical. So I keep researching, and I actually find a 1965 edition of what is called UFO Nachrichten in German, which literally translates to the UFO Bulletin. And I went, wait a second, maybe this is the origin of the Belgian UFO Bulletin. Well, good question there, because Germany and Belgium both speak the Germanic language. And so I had this article translated. Amazing, super amazing. And I kept researching forward, and I found a 1967 article from Sputnik Magazine. It's in a French edition. It's called Des Visiteurs du Cosmos, sorry, which means the cosmic visitors. And a lot of what came out of the documentary from 2004, this UFO Files documentary, comes out of this article in Sputnik Magazine. So there's the Russian edition where the discs end up in Russia for testing and harmonic quantum oscillation testing. Okay. There's also the original story, which is almost a parody of the story coming out of this periodical from Germany, UFO Nachrichten. It's literally the same. And in the first paragraph of it, it says, hey, this came out of another article from vegetarian universe. And it's like, okay, but there's no publication date or edition, so there's no way to research this. And so all this became a very interesting aspect to more and more research. And so I kept researching into the Dropa Stones, and a lot of them look a lot like these. This is a bidisc from China. The Dropa stone is described very similarly. It's about a foot in diameter. It has a circular hole in the center and spiraling glyphic writing around the center of it. This is made out of jade, but in the Soviet documentation of the mineral excavation from the disc, it's jadeite. And so jadeite basically is a form of granite that has jade infused within it, as well as mercury and cobalt. And so when you're doing harmonic oscillation testing, you're literally attaching electrodes to it, and you're pulsing massive amounts of electricity through it to see if it holds a charge or if it already has held a charge. And they found that it not only could hold a charge, but it had a charge within it from eons and eons before, where it was around massive amounts of electricity. And so what is this? What are they discovering here? Anyway.
Now, for those, okay, so let's back up and very briefly, the story goes, and again, I'm condensing this down. This is very bridged. That the discs are about 12,000 years old. They were discovered in central China in a mountain range. And
Brien Foerester, Brien Harshan. Yep.
Yep. And a long ways from Nepal, by the way. Yeah. And the Dropa people that you describe are part of this story, that they were 4 feet tall and lived in the mountains, and that's where the name the Dropa Stones came from, but that they were extraterrestrial in origin, and that after the initial discovery, photographs were taken. This is a long time ago, and that the stones were on display in a museum in China. A couple of them. There was a whole pile of these stones that had hieroglyphs on it that turned out to be extraterrestrial in origin, that nobody could read them, but that this was an origin story from the extraterrestrials. So that's kind of it. Do you have anything else to add to the story? I don't want to say myth or folklore, but that's part of it, trying to chase this down. Is there anything else you want to add to the origin
So in
story?
1938, a cultural archaeologist named Chipute, that's not his name, that's part of my research, went into the Bayan Harshan range of what is now central China. It was then considered Kham Tibet. And so in this region are a bunch of cave systems. They've found everything from petroglyphs to manuscripts, like ancient religious Buddhist manuscripts, to even mummies. So you have the Tara mummies coming out of this region. And because you're in such an arid region, obviously it would long last skeletal or mummified remains, documents, so on and so forth. I don't want to dive too deep into this. Obviously, I'm talking about this at Conscious Live Expo, but so Chipute and his team find all these artifacts in the cave. They take him back to basically the Beijing Academy of Sciences. 20 years later, 1958, another researcher there translates what's on the disc. It's supposedly in an alien language, but if you actually read the translation, I'm not quite convinced of that. I'm convinced that it's more of the culture that was in this region that witnessed the event happening. And so to me, that makes a little bit more sense. And the question of the dating of when these discs showed up, or the cultural showed up, versus when the translation showed up, is kind of a mix. There's an idea that they came more than once. And so this is part of, a huge chunk of my research into that there's a possibility that they showed up 10,000 years ago, but they also showed up within the last 2,000 years a second time.
Now, about how many discs were found? Like 700 or something?
So there's one disc that's found that actually has the the glyphic writing on it in a spiral form, spiraling out from the center. They found 716 other discs, which is interesting, but we're not told in any of the research if any of them had any glyphic writing on them. The only one we're told about is the one that was found at the front of the cave with the buried remains.
Have you seen any? I'm sure you have. So the answer is yes. But have you seen other images, any additional images of the actual stone itself?
I have not. No.
Really?
I have some concepts about what it looks like. There is Hartwig Hausdorff, who's part of this documentary, wrote the Chinese Roswell. There was a character named Werner. God, I can't think of his full name. He's a German guy that went into China in the 1980s after the Maoist Cultural Revolution ended. And some of these discs, whether they're buy discs or not, ended up in the Bompo Museum in the middle of China. And so he took photos of them and asked about them, and then everything was hushed. And so Hartwig Hausdorff went there again several years later to ask about this, and he was pretty much ushered away as if, oh, we don't want to talk about this story. And so the question is, what were the discs? Well, what's interesting about Chinese buy discs is we don't really know what they were used for. They are hundreds found in grave sites. And so the question is, are these related to, what we're talking about with the Dropa or Kham people of Far Eastern Tibet? And nobody really knows. Most of them have nothing written on them. The one I have has Proto-Chinese glyphic writing. It's more of a blessing to whoever was buried with this disc. I don't really know. I haven't been able to get it translated. I've asked several people, but yeah, it's an interesting aspect of this story. How do we how do we know what's on these discs? How do we know where these discs come from, and how do we know how old they are? And so it's interesting that these three researchers, claim that a lot of this story is a hoax, which is why I tried to dive deeper into it. But if you're looking at people coming out of this region, you have this Drokpa nomadic people coming directly out of this region. They're literally 4 foot tall. They have an orangish skin or a complexion to them, and they have blue eyes. Well, you don't find blue eyes in China. You don't find blue eyes in Tibet. You don't find blue eyes in Bhutan, Nepal, or any of this region. And so who are these people? They don't speak Tibetan. They don't speak Nepalese, which are the two most regional languages of the area. They speak a language that's older than Sanskrit. It's called Shina. And there's 3 dialects of it. There's Shina Brokskat, Menoraskat, and Brokat. And this is spoken by probably, I would say, less than 2,000 people in the world today.
Well, then what do the Dropa have to say about this story? And if that's the case, how do you get a translator to come in and find out?
Well, this is interesting because part of my thesis research goes into Bhutan. And so the Drokpa were basically influential in creating the kingdom of Bhutan. They brought in the linguistics that are now in Bhutan, Tibetan and Hindi. They translated Sanskrit into Tibetan and Hindi. The language they speak, Shina, is interesting because it's a what do you call it? It's a gendered language, kind of like Thai or Spanish. So you have a male and a female tongue to it, but it also has 3 phases, 3 hierarchies. So you have a common tongue, or the child's tongue. You have a common tongue, and then you have the upper caste tongue. Yeah.
Yeah. Do they have a written language?
It's very similar to what you would see in Urdu or Arabic. It's more of a script language versus a glyphic language, which is why if this was what was written on the discs that were translated, obviously you can't translate an alien language unless you have an alien script. And this is something that the three people in the documentary alluded to. Like, how do you translate an alien language without a cipher? You can't. But if you actually look at the two original articles that talk about this, what they're describing is not an alien language, it's describing somebody observing them crashing. And so this would have been in the
Right.
script of the region. And so what would that have been? It would have been either Com Tibetan or Shina. Well, okay, both of these languages look very alien to a Chinese scholar in the 1950s. And so obviously at some point she would have realized that, oh my God, possibly there's a regional language that looks like this, and I can discover it, and it will take me a little bit of time, and then I can translate it. And so the translation comes down to us as the Dropa came down from the clouds in their winged gliders 10 times before the sunset. The local villagers hid in the caves until they realized this time they came with peaceful intentions. And so this is both in UFO Nachrichten and Sputnik magazine. This is not the description of an alien language or an alien deciphering. This is somebody in the region telling us this is what we witnessed. And so it's interesting because winged gliders, yeah, okay, well, that doesn't mean that it was a craft, but because there's a transliteration issue across these topics, um, it comes to us from China. It ends up in German. It then is translated English. From German, it's also translated to Russian through Sputnik magazine. And then I received, a copy in French. And so all these languages have different syntaxes. And so you're going to hear something differently with all these languages. Well, this is transliteration. To those of you in the audience who don't know what transliteration is, it's literally a game of intellectual telephone. Hear something in one language, I'm going to transcribe it into my language so that you all can realize what I heard, but is it completely accurate, right? And so we've got syntaxes from China to German to English to, Russian to French. All these languages have a different syntax. They're all going to describe things differently.
Now, didn't the text say, and I'm just going off my memory here, that the aliens lived in the mountains for a time and interacted with humans, right?
Yeah, they had to eventually. I mean, when they crash landed, they weren't used to the climate, obviously, the rarefied air, the cold weather, and so they sent out search parties to find food, water, clothing, whatnot. Eventually, they had to trade their metals from their craft to the locals. They had to interbreed and intermix with them. They took on their religion, they took on their likeness in a sense because they're a genetic cousin of ours. And so well, if they look like us, then they're gonna look like us with their children as well to some degree.
Such a fascinating story. And
Literally.
it is.
I have so much more to say. I can't go
Well,
super
no,
deep
and
into it.
we've got a lot more to cover tonight too, as well. But the do you and then we'll move on. Do you think that the Chinese government pulled that the Dropa stone that they had on display at the museum was real? They pulled it, and they don't want this story told because it would it would contradict the cultural part of China and what they want the Chinese people to believe.
In September 2021, China announced that they are going to put a 1.5 kilometer long generational sleeper ship of sorts into orbit around Earth to do scientific studies around Earth, eventually possibly going to Mars and other planets, and then maybe even going interstellar. And so if you look into the Dropa story, they came here in a sleeper generational craft, kind of like a Moamua. I'll just leave it at that. Okay, because Avi Loeb looked at Oumuamua and said, "My God, this could possibly be an artificial air, an artificial object coming from interstellar space." Um, Astronomy magazine basically claimed that it picked up its rotation through a binary star system. Sirius is a binary star system, and so there's this object, but in 2021, China basically said, we're building this in outer space. We're going to start doing this soon. And this is going to be some sort of a interplanetary, interstellar generational object for all of humankind. So it beggars the question, well, when they invaded this area of Tibet in 1950 and pushed through, what did they find in the Bayankar Ula, What have they been reverse engineering for the last 75 years? And
Very interesting.
Why are they now announcing that they're going to release a craft very similar to what possibly the Dropa came here on?
Yeah, they have made leaps in space technology. You know what? I want to say that we're going to stay ahead for a while. I'm talking about the United States. Russia certainly has got their thing going on. China has just risen out of nowhere. Yes. I mean, and they have got they are interstellar. That is their quest. They're probably going to beat us to Mars. They're not playing around, man. And landing on the dark side of the moon.
Our bluff. Oh, we're going to Mars. Well, are we? Thank you, right. Elon Musk, for proposing this, but what is the reality of this? And China's like, pardon my French, F this. We're going. Whatever it takes. We might lose a few astronauts in situ, but we're going to figure our way there.
Now, and this is where we're going to kind of change gears. It seems like that there was some ET interfacing going on in China. That's what it feels to me. But ET has to be an Earth thing. It's not a United States thing, right? It's simply not.
Of course not.
Yeah. We want it to be. I get that. I do. But
it's just us.
Yeah, it's just us. We planted a flag here. But when you go to Peru, if they're, to me, and I'm not talking about the Nazca mummies and all of which is interesting, and the elongated skulls, which is interesting, Paracas, which is interesting for sure. But there was something going on there a long time ago. And when you push back the clocks, the 12,000 year timeline with the Dropa Stones is extremely compelling. And then you have the very same thing going on in Pumapunku and Tiwanaku and the Sun Temple and throughout other cultural sites throughout Peru. It's that 12,000 year timeline, which goes to Göbekli Tepe and ancient Egypt too as well. But do you see an ET connection with Peru?
Big time. You've been there. Did you go up to Bolivia at all? Did you go to Titicaca?
Yeah, I did. Oh yeah.
So this used to be a seaport, and so it's the question is why did it end up at 13,000 feet? But not just Lake Titicaca, but there are spots in Peru between Cusco and Ollantaytambo that are lake as well that have extraterrestrial UFOs leaving and entering the lakes, according to the locals. And so I've always found this really fascinating. Why these spots? Well, if you start looking on ley lines, they're all on ley lines. It's really interesting. When I was in Egypt with Brien Foerester and his wife Irene in 2018, we were on top of the Nile cruise, and it was probably 6-7 o'clock at night. there are 8 or 9 of us still up on top, having a good time, chatting up Brien and his wife. And this orb whips by. And then 2 F-15s. And then about a minute later, another orb whips by, slow motion going, hello, here we are. And Irene has video footage of this. It was mind blowing. And this happened about the same time here in Portland, Oregon, that a UFO was sighted whipping past PDX airport, which is where all the F-35s are now stationed. They used to be down in Southern Oregon, but they moved them all to Portland. And they launched those things so quickly to see how fast they could keep up with them, or whatever it was that whipped by the airport, heading toward Fort Lewis, towards Seattle. And it's interesting. It was almost the same day in Egypt that we were having this experience, and I was blown away by that. And so I've had two thoughts in my mind. Okay, this could be extraterrestrial, or are these drones that we're training our pilots with? And there's a good possibility of both.
Yeah, I last month, I'll just relay this story to you. I talked about it immediately on the air when it happened. But I was after the show one night. I went out. The meteor shower was going on. It's about a month ago. 6 weeks
Where are you
ago.
located?
I'm right next to Skunk Works in the Mojave
really?
Desert.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Skunk Works is
That's why
Skunk Works is
before the show.
yeah. It's every day.
Okay.
Look, I've got my F-35. I've got my F-35 shirt on. See, check it out. Yeah. This is my F-35 team shirt from Northrop Grumman, a gift from them. I won't tell you how I got it. There's a secret there. But anyway, so I go out to watch the meteor shower out back. I live in the desert. It's beautiful at night. And I'm out there watching the meteor shower. I'm upstairs on my top deck. And then while I'm watching the meteor shower go on, I see something catches my eye. It had been up there for a while, but I was watching the meteors. But the reason why it caught my eye is because it stopped and then reversed on itself right in front of me. And I was like, oh, now you got my attention. Okay. So anyway, I watched this thing zigzag around for about 30 minutes, and it had 3 lights on the bottom of it that were strobing, right? It wasn't like, right. It was like strobing. And twice it came out. I keep saying this, maybe 3 times. So maybe it was 3 times. It came out almost over my house, but it stayed in like this box right above Skunk Works, right? And it was just zigzagging. And anyway, when it came over me, I could see the 3 lights were in a triangle position. I'm not saying it was a triangle craft. I'm not saying any of that. I'm not going there. But it was silent. And that was because I was expecting prop noise or, engine noise of some kind. There was nothing. Anyway, so it goes back and it does its thing. Now, was that ET? I'm not so sure. I think it was big, whatever it was, but they were testing something. And so going back to your point, eventually whatever it is that I'm seeing here is going to go somewhere else. It's going to go up to Edwards. They're going to test it further. It's going to go somewhere else. It's going to go into production, and then you're going to test. And who is going to confuse something like this for an ET craft or a TR-3B? Well, a lot of people. Yeah, for sure. For sure. It didn't strike me as ET. You know what? I got bored. I didn't even videotape it. I got bored. I went in the house, but I think it was up there 30 minutes, and I'm just watching it, do this thing. And I didn't want to videotape it because if it was something classified, I'm not going to be that guy. Everybody knows me here in Palmdale, and
right?
I just don't need to be that guy. But yeah. Would we freak out and say that if somebody saw this in some other part of the world? Yeah, probably. It wasn't red lights or blue lights or anything. No, it was 3 strobing lights. There was, equilateral triangle.
This would shift from like an orange to a blue, but my first thought was, okay, a drone craft can do G forces that a pilot can't. And so why would we not train our pilots to express their open envelope to G forces with these devices? So yeah, that was my first thought. But who knows? Who really knows?
Well, and going back to Peru, you mentioned the Nile cruise, and I also only once though in Egypt did I see anything strange, and I was
I've
up
never.
top.
That was the only time. Yeah.
Yeah, I only saw, and this was at the Sphinx, and I didn't
Oh,
see it.
interesting.
A friend of mine videoed it. Well, everybody reacted. We were in the back of the Sphinx, and we were back there with Muhammad Ibrahim, and doing our thing back there, whatever, talking about erosion or something. It was in the morning. It was early in the morning, 6 a.m. or something. And then suddenly I hear everybody go, ooh and ah. And I turned around and everybody was pointing. And did you see that? Did you see that? Did you see it? Right, like they're pointing. And then I saw the video. Yeah, man. It was like for real. Yeah, like right above Khafre. We are at the tail of the
God, you
Sphinx.
guys were there early in the morning. Wow.
Yeah, early in the
Interesting.
morning, and it was right above Khafre, and this thing sputters and lights up and goes and just I think it did
Takes
a
off.
little curvy thing or a little jitter, but anyway, takes off and goes. The video is like Crazy Town, which I have, and I have permission to
I
show
would
it.
love to
So I
see
will.
that at some
Yeah,
point.
I will. I
Wow.
will. Yeah, it was great, but that was the only thing I've ever seen in Egypt, and I mean, we all were looking up to the sky because when you're on the Nile River at night, it's blackness.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yep. Because
Yeah.
you don't have the pollution of city lights at
Now
all.
going back to Peru, you mentioned Bolivia. What do you think about the symbolism that's going on there at Pumapunku and Tiwanaku, and throughout Peru?
So Lake Titicaca, the sites around that are very different. I mean, both Tiwanaku and Pumapunku are very different. And it's interesting that 100 kilometers north of Lake Titicaca, you find the Magma Fuente Bowl. And so this is fascinating. This farmer found it digging up his field one day, about a meter wide. It's got glyphic shapes of sea creatures around the outside of it, and then what looks like cuneiform on the inside of it. And he used it to feed his pigs. And eventually somebody realized this is not your pig bowl. This is actually an ancient artifact. And they translated the glyphic writing that's inside of it. It's basically an homage to the goddess Tia, and it's blessing the people that have crossed the seas and for the fertility and lush crops that they have been able to find in the new land. And so this is Proto-Sumerian cuneiform. What is this doing in Bolivia? Well, it's interesting because there's a hieroglyph outside of Tanis that Yusuf Iwan, the son of Hakim Abdel Iwan, the famous wisdom keeper of ancient Kemet, he found this glyph in one of the temple structures outside of Tanis that says basically under the dome of Nut in the land of Tawin or ancient Kem, there is a place of many houses across four waters. And so, well, what are the four waters? You got the Nile, the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, and the Amazon, or you could go all the way around and into the Pacific Ocean. That would be the fourth water, and you would end up at Paracas. Or you could go basically the Mediterranean to the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean and across through the trade currents of the Pacific Ocean to basically Santiago de Chile. And so we have this character named Mahui. Mahui is around 232 BC. Mahui and his captain Rata made this voyage. They circumnavigated Australia. They ended up on the north coast of New Zealand. There's glyphic writing there. There's the Cave of the Navigator that also talks about Maui. He ended up in Santiago de Chile, went up the coast to Peru, possibly went across the Easter Island, even up to Hawaii and up to Alaska. And so this is the character that most Polynesians know as Maui. He's a god of the seas. He came out of the seas and he unified all of our people, but he actually is an Egyptian or Greco-Egyptian admiral. And so they were crossing the seas. We're told in history that the seas were barriers, not highways, but they were highways. I mean, obviously, we were crossing the seas in ancient times. And so when you end up in Peru, you've been to Peru, you've been into Lima, I'm sure, the Lima Larco Museum of Gold. And in the basement, there are 3 headdresses, and one of them is the headdress of a moon, and it has 2 fingers that stick up above it. And this is right out of ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet from like 2000 BC or older. What's it doing? What's it doing in Peru?
I find that aspect of it fascinating. And at Tiwanaku, you know what? I might have an image that I can pull up. So at Tiwanaku, I go off by myself, and I'm.
You had awesome! You had sacred time there. Yay!
Yeah. And I'm off by myself. Okay, so yeah, I've got images here. So let me pull this up for a second, and let me get this ready to go.
Exciting.
And so, but I round the corner there, and I come up to this spot, and here is the image here. And so now I don't know why nobody else has mentioned this, but I see this, and
you're not sharing it yet.
No, I'm sharing it now.
Okay.
I'm talking at the same time. I'm
gotcha.
walking and chewing gum. And so I round the corner,
awesome.
and I see this, and I go, wait a minute. That's Göbekli Tepe.
Seriously. Oh my goodness.
Here, with got the belt, and the hands across the abdomen and everything else. And this is big, by the way. This is like, I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I just stopped and I looked at this, and I keep seeing the same type of human figure around the world. What is it about the hands across the waist and humans presented this way, as opposed to, and I'm talking about the T-pillars, of course, in Göbekli Tepe, and now I'm in Tiwanaku, and I'm seeing the exact same thing. The fashion statement, the belt, the decorations.
This one is interesting, and I'm glad you're showing this, because this is, similar, but also very different. So it has the one arm around the waist, and the other is around the heart.
Yes.
You don't see this in any of the other glyphs, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I was stopped in my tracks, man.
This is really an interesting. Wow, thank you for sharing this.
Yeah, and and so what I ended up doing. Let me pull. I'm going to pull this down for a second. What I ended up doing is going around through not only Peru and Bolivia, but at different sites around the world. That includes Göbekli Tepe and Turkey, the Karahan Tepe. And then I was just
on the bucket list.
yeah. But I was just in Canada, and I'm seeing it again. It's weird.
Really?
Where
okay.
Now you're on the show, and we're talking about symbolism. But what I ended up seeing here, and I'm going to pull this up, and
this is all part of symbolic representation.
Well,
for sure.
and I'll tell you why. Here's the H blocks at Pumapunku. Now I couldn't wait to get there and see them, but like we all do, right? But I'm looking at them, and suddenly I see now the archaeologists and the historians in Bolivia will tell you that Pumapunku and Tiwanaku are not related, although you can hit one with a rock, right? From the sites, you can walk to them. But anyway, so I see this. Oh man, the program is frozen here, but it's not on the screen. Okay, that's weird. All right, everybody, I just want you to know that something's frozen on my computer. I don't know what's going on. Let me pull this down.
Honestly, a lot of this looks like stuff that you find in a lot of the ancient Indian sites in India. There's so many similarities to Pumapunku and India that are mind blowing to me. Just looking at.
Well, so again, man, it's this. Okay, I'm back up and running. So I'm going to pull this up first, and I'm going to show this to everybody. And I want your comments on this. This is Mesopotamia. And this is from Jason Quitt's book that we have worked on. Now, see this symbol? Now, this is called the Gate of Enki, right? Now, see that symbol? You see that? Right? You see that? You see this all over the world. And I saw this in KV-14 in Valley of the Kings, which is what caught Jason's attention. And so that's Jason's book. This is me in Karnak at the Temple of the Seven Gates.
Yep.
All right.
Exactly where you're standing.
Yep. It's amazing, right? Right.
Wow,
which is a purported Stargate. And so
alabaster behind you, which is even more interesting.
And so here we are. This is the top of Machu Picchu.
Machu Picchu, yeah.
And you see it here. There's 3 windows here facing out. And you see it here. And I'm going through and you see it? You see it? You see once you see it, you can't unsee it, right?
Yeah. It's the lentil over the exactly.
Yep. And this is in Cusco. This is just on a street in Cusco. This is
the red fort. I know where that is. Yep.
Yeah,
it's also in Peru. Yep.
Yeah, look at that. And this is just, and you know what's crazy? This is just along the highway there, right? You just pull off the road and you walk down the hill. And there's this group, but I took that.
This is all the red at the red fort.
And then here's a Maru.
Same thing. Exactly.
Same thing. And so then I go down to this is Pumapunku.
Yep.
And you see that down there at the end? You see that at the end? What do you see right there?
Same.
Right? Okay, so now check that out. It's like crazy. Right? And I'm seeing this symbolism everywhere I go. I'm going to start this again. Look at that. Right? Okay, look at this right here. Right? There it is again. What is going on with this? So then I see it in the H blocks.
Yeah.
Right?
And the sunken doors. There's a famous, I don't know if Brian took you to the site, but it's called Napa Iglesia or Napa Waka.
It's so cool.
Way up.
Oh yeah,
and in the middle of nowhere.
I've got pictures. That was one of, you know what? Everything in Peru is great, but that church and the symbolism that is there, and the way that you look out across the valley, it is just absolutely incredible. It tested me. Now look at this. This is in Pumapunku. This is at an unexcavated, partially excavated site, but what do we have?
More of the same. Oh my God.
More of the same. And then, so here we are, right? There's the H blocks. And then, so I go across and they keep telling me there's nothing to see here. When it comes, with Tiwanaku.
That's funny, right?
So see this block right here? I'm walking in Tiwanaku and I'm by myself. And I walk behind this block, and this is what I see. Beep. This is at Tiwanaku, not Pumapunku.
So there is a direct connection. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
all
Of
the way
course.
back to Inky. That's the exact same symbol that is here's the sun gate, right? You see it right
Yep.
there. There it is. You see
Hey,
the
Brian.
outline. Yeah. So look, it's right here.
Same exact. Oh my God. Wow, it's everywhere.
Yeah. Going all the way back. Let's just swing this back to right there. The gate of Inky. So when we look at this kind of symbol, we're talking about the same symbol, transoceanic and culturally, that shouldn't touch, right? Should
Seriously.
not
Yeah.
touch, but it's exact. And I was seeing it in my dreams, man. Yeah. I when it comes to symbolism like this, what pops into your mind first?
Gates. So, gates are huge in symbology. Obviously they transverse worlds. So you're going through a gate from one world to another, from one property to another. So there's a religious aspect, there's a, very physical aspect to gates. The fact that you have this refraction going back, into the structure is even more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because what does that represent? Layers. You were saying that one had 7, so these are chakra points. This is the nesting doll within our own body that we kind of got to realize through both ancient chematology, even Buddhism. You have nesting dolls. Each one is a different layer of your soul or your persona or your body. And so, is this what's being represented in these walls? Good possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, and we always and thank you, Roland Emmerich, for giving us Stargate, right?
Yes.
But
Brilliant.
I'm really glad that the word is out there, because that's modern, still one of the greatest films ever made, but the conversation about stargates and doors and false doors, it goes back thousands and thousands of years. It didn't start with Roland Emmerich. I just showed you the dating of the Sun Temple, the Sun Gate at Tiwanaku, goes back 12 to 15,000 years, and with the celestial alignments. This is not anything new. This goes back a long, long ways, doesn't it?
You also see this in Buddhist and Hindu architecture as well, where you have, reliefs within the dzongs or monasteries. And so the question is, what is that for? Well, it's the same thing. It's energetic, energetic doubles of ourselves that go back throughout the course. And so this is also, again, these nesting dolls within ourselves.
The idea of you mentioned transoceanic and the possibility of, why is it that science and anthropology and historians absolutely don't want to go there? They don't want to talk about boats. They don't want to talk about contact between cultures, between continents. It's the one area, and that it turns into pseudoscience and pseudo history.
It kind of does. And you got to look at it and go, oh my God, they want to stick to a biblical reference. So nothing existed before 7,000 years. And so everything has to neatly fit within this. And it's interesting that you say that because, okay, you look at the last ice age. And so you have a continental shelf of ice that's 2 miles high, sitting over where I am in Oregon right now, literally stretching across the entirety of the globe. Yet we're told that the ancients crossed the land bridge, or this Northwest Passage, through Alaska down into California. But if you actually look at where it was, you're still traversing thousands of miles of 2-mile thick ice. What are you eating? How are you getting any sort of vitamin C? How are you getting potable water? What are you hunting? I mean, this is impossible. You just can't do this unless you're going in front of it on boats. And so in San Francisco, when they were digging up the harbor originally, they found a junk that they thought was the size of a small village. And so they realized that the ancients were coming across the oceans with these large barges that were village size, and they had livestock, and they were able to fish and, bring over their families and whatnot. And I think this is how it more happened than traversing thousands of miles of ice that you have no food, water, or any. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. And this is the story that we're continually told. Oh, the oceans were barriers; they weren't highways. No, they truly were, because it's very obvious that we have cross-cultural pollination across the world. And you start looking into the stories of Atlantis. Okay, half of the scholars are like, Atlantis was one island that sunk into the ocean, but in reality, there were five capitals worldwide. And so this is a global community, a global time. So Atlantis wasn't a place, it was a time period. And so the question was, okay, how far had they stretched? Obviously, much of the world is under ice, and so the oceans are much smaller, or more shallow, and so they could traverse to the different island groups much easier during that time period. I mean, this is my opinion, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, well, you go to Thor Heyerdahl. Yes, I get that. Two, the Kentika 1 and the Kentika 2 showed clearly that this was possible. They were a little bit tattered at the end of that journey.
We shoved off from Paracas and didn't even put up his sails, and ended up at Easter Island. And so,
it's incredible. But then you go. This is the trip. And I'm being very, very serious here. You go to Titicaca and you look around, you don't see Peru.
No.
You see Egypt. That is all Egypt all the time. The colors, the design, the boats, the look, the vibe. It's Egypt. It's the Nile River. It's like you're in another. It's like where are we? Are you sure? Did you you went to the floating islands, right?
Yeah.
It's Egypt.
You can rent like a hotel overnight there and just like have this amazing like Titicaca experience. And they've even sent divers down, and they found underwater structures that were there that used to be above water. And so, God, it really beggars the question: what happened? Was this the Halcyon Comet event? Did it cause isostasy of the landmass, because the Himalayas have similar aspects to like Titicaca? You'll find freshwater dolphin in the rivers in the Himalayas. Where are these coming from? In Lake Titicaca, you have freshwater sharks, and you have what are they called? Seahorses. These are all saltwater beings. What are they doing, at high altitudes in rivers and lakes? And so, how quickly were these land masses formed? That is, I guess, what the question is.
Yeah, when you go to, you mentioned Kathmandu and Nepal, how it was 1500, right? It was like frozen in time. And you go to Titicaca, and especially as an American doofus tourist, I'm from Chicago,
I'm from Chicago.
right? Yeah, and I've been to the great mall in Minneapolis, right? And you go from that, right? And you go to Titicaca, and you go and visit a family on one of those floating islands, and you see a disconnect from the world. That is a whole nother. And you have to be nothing but impressed, right? How they live, how they figured this out, how happy they are, right?
And that's the key, the happiness. And so even in the villages, the remote villages in Nepal, yeah, okay, they've got micro hydro, micro solar, and so they brought TVs and sadly refrigerators up to the villages. But when I was there in the 90s, these people were happy. They had nothing, but they were immensely happy because of that. They didn't have to have the stress of keeping up with the rest of the Western world, which is what has happened sadly in Nepal as of recent.
Yeah, man, I just Titicaca just freaked me out. And and you also see this though in Peru and Egypt. When you head out, you get outside of Cairo, right? And
Oh God, yeah, you're heading south toward
Luxor,
Dendera, Luxor,
Dendara, right?
any of those areas, yeah.
Yeah, you get way out there, and there is a serious the main technology they have, the donkey,
Yeah,
the donkey.
exactly. Oh my
That's
God,
it. That's it.
so true.
You look at
So
the
true.
house, the farm, right? You see everything going. There's no car. Lots of donkeys, right? Pulling stuff around. Lots of carts and series. You know what though? You will see a satellite dish. You will see a satellite.
This is the reality of modern times. Obviously, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think we're going to find out? Let's swing back to Egypt. Let's take our commercial break, which we were supposed to do a minute ago. Let's do that.
Dunny, mate, so, yeah.
Our guest tonight, Hans Dietrich. We're talking about all of his research and travels around the world. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest, Hans Dietrich, is with us. Tonight, the magic of symbols and his travels around the world. And what I find interesting, Hans and I have a very similar career path. And I started out, I don't talk about this much on the show, but I was an artist. what I went to school for. When my first job at Bell Labs in the graphic design department of ED&D, engineering, design, and development at Bell Labs. And that's how I paid my rent and ate and everything, was graphic design. This is back Hans is a graphic design in the computer world, probably. But I go back to cut and paste with an X-Acto knife and wax galleys. Did you ever experience the wax galley, Hans?
Somewhat. So that's interesting that wow, I had no idea your background. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing
that's
that.
that's my background. And so
Wow.
because of that, very early on, when you're in school for graphic design, where you're taught about the circle, the triangle, and the square, and that was my first logo for my
Yeah,
company.
you are.
Was
Exactly.
I did that anyway. You start to see, because you get into logo design and the Bell Telephone logos and Bell Laboratories, who I work for, Western Electric and Bell Telephone, and so you study, and then you end up looking at corporate logos around, and you see it everywhere you go. You
Every
can't help
day,
it as
everywhere you
an
go. Once you
everywhere
see
you
it, you
go.
can't
Just
unsee it. Yeah.
you can't. And going into the zone that I'm in today, the symbols are powerful. They are
Yes,
powerful, and it goes back to the very dawn of man, doesn't it?
it does. So it's interesting that you say that about kind of your background in design and whatnot. When I was going through art school in the mid '90s, the internet had not been invented yet. A lot of the technology that I use today, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, these were not programs that were where they are today. And so I had to learn how to do design a lot like you, cut and paste using the compass, the protractor, the square, all these things to develop these three symbols, the circle, the triangle, and the square. And people don't realize that these three symbols are the three symbols that make up everything that we see today. Unbelievable. And they go way back. So you're looking at like Zoroastrianism and even like ancient Zen Buddhism, where they're talking about the universe being these three symbols, and how these three symbols are also the symbol of us, man, right? So you have the circle, the triangle is your upper torso, and the square is your lower torso. And so I started looking into this, symbolically, as you said. I'm surrounded by symbols. Half the companies I work for have some really interesting symbology going on with their logos, and so I started looking into a lot of this, and I discovered through it, obviously through my schooling, that the circle, the triangle, and the square are the three base elements of all this. Why? Because they're not just these three elements. They also take on different numerators, different aspects, different um, personas in a sense, and so you can add multipliers to each one of them. So you have the circle, the triangle, and the square. That's your base element. If you want to add numerology to it, okay, the circle is infinity, so it's a one, right? It's one-sided. The triangle is three-sided, and the square is four-sided. Well, you add that up, you have 1 plus 3 plus 4, you have 8. So here's your magic number of infinity, right? With 8. So next, you can add colors. Well, okay, what colors would you add to these symbols? Well, the circle is going to be blue, the triangle is going to be red, and the square is going to be green. So here you have red, green, blue. So any of you in film out there, red, green, and blue is what makes up your anything that's projected light. So
Primary colors.
yeah, primary colors. And so when you cross these over as light spectrums, they create a bright white. Well, this is interesting because it's alchemical light. You can also do the same thing with pigments. And so when you cross red, green, and blue as pigments, you create a rich black, basically. So It's reversed from light to pigment. So you have light and earth elements. And so this is your alchemical elements. So how would you multiply it again? Well, then you add elements. So the blue circle becomes water, right? The red triangle becomes fire, and the green cube or square becomes earth. So here are your alchemical elements again. You take the prima materia, the earth, you mix it with the water and the fire, and you create the philosopher's stone. So here's your alchemical elements from these three base shapes. Well, where else can we multiply them? Okay, so let's multiply them to the next level. So here we have dimensionality. So the blue water becomes the sphere, right? So the red fire triangle becomes the pyramidium or pyramid, in a sense, pyramidion, because it's not four sides on the bottom, it's 3, 3, 3, and 3. So, and then you have the green earth square becoming the cube. Well, it's interesting that Earth would be represented by a cube because you have 6 continents on Earth: North America, South America, Eurasia, Africa, Australia, Antarctica, right? And so these are the cube elements. And so all of a sudden you have these elements of life. Well, how does this apply to us as the physical being? Well, okay. You take the water sphere, this becomes our head, as I mentioned earlier. You take the tetrahedron, this becomes our torso, and you take the cube, and this becomes our base. Well, okay. Why would the head be the water element? Well, we've got our tear ducts, we've got our, nostril mucus, we've got our salivary glands, we've got eye fluid, we've got pineal gland fluid, we've got brain fluid, we've got, all these fluids coming out of the heads. When we sweat through our glands, which usually start perspiring.
You drink water.
You drink water through your head. Bingo. Okay, so this is our water element. Why would the torso be your fire element? Well, all of your generation organs are within your chest or within this torso. So you have your lungs. This is pumping, the bellows of the fire of your body. Your heart is pumping the blood through your body. Okay, you've got your digestive system. So this is also creating the energy that pumps.
It's the engine. It's the motor. It's the
fully exactly.
Yeah.
So in the sacred feminine, the womb is also in this space, right? Because that's creating the next generation of life. Okay, so then we get to the lower torso, and we've got the cube. We're solid. We're planted on the earth through our feet, in a sense, okay? But we're also refertilizing the earth through our lower torso. So in the male, we have our fertile organs, right? Okay. In all of us, we excrete urine and feces through our lower torso. This is a refertilization process, and we're grounded to the earth. And so it's interesting that the sacred seed of fertilization comes from the earth and goes up into the fire of the womb and then creates the being around us. And so this is why these 3 symbols, the triangle, the circle, and the square, are the most magical symbols, and they make up everything around us, quite literally.
There's a tie in here to the Lord of the Rings. Hear me out. Hear me out. So I'm 15 years old. I'm reading the trilogy for the first time. And me and my friends are getting together every night, and we're all reading it at the same time, and doing a little and talking about the books, right? And then, but there's a section when Gandalf disappears, right? And then when he comes back, he's no longer Gandalf the Gray.
He's Gandalf the White.
He's Gandalf of all colors.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, he was Gandalf of all colors. And so I'm sitting there with my friends going, okay, so is it like red, yellow, green, and
no, he's the color of magic. And so
it's Gandalf of all colors. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
rainbow of colors, but in the middle of it is this brightness, and so it's like you barely see the rainbow of colors, and this is what people experience when they watch UFOs. They see that rainbow of colors, that all light, as you're describing. Interesting.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It all goes back to the Lord of the Rings. But yeah, and so back to the symbolism idea of this. So and most don't realize when you look at anything, you can look at a car, you can look at a house, skyscraper, street, food packaging, it doesn't matter. You're going to have those three design elements there. You're going to have a combination of those three colors there, and that going through your eyeballs and into your brain, that symbolism, you will see it. Now you go back, you can't unsee it. You will see the incorporation of all of this in everything.
It's even in the guitars behind you, mate.
Yes, 100%. Every
Yeah.
single one of them. Just about. There isn't anything on this planet that doesn't have. You cannot have a design without those three elements and those three colors involved.
There's also other amazing elements that are planetary. And so both Saturn and Sirius come up a lot in corporate logos. You find Saturnian symbology in anything that deals with technology, and literally anything that now deals with AI. It's really interesting that this element of Saturn just keeps coming around. And of course, Sirius deals with, esoteric mystery schools, Templars, Rosicrucians, Masons. They all have this adheration to Sirius, which is the blazing star. And so you see this symbology also represented in a lot of timepieces and corporate logos of today. And so you also see it in movies. It's in film, it's in media, it's in logos, and it stems across the course of time. And Saturn, I think, is the most interesting because it's literally influenced all of our religions, from ancient Rome, ancient Greek, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, even Hindu religion is influenced by Saturn. And so Saturn is one of the most amazing symbols, in a sense, out there. Primarily, it starts with Saturn or Kronos. So Kronos is the father of all gods.
Now, and you have the sun, you have the moon, in logos everywhere, and symbology, very powerful. You can't go anywhere to any ancient site. It doesn't matter, any megalithic structure, and you are going to see that symbology there.
Yeah. Sun, moon, yeah, Saturn, Sirius, it's all there in a lot of the ancient structures. Which is why, anywhere you go, all of a sudden the archaeologists are saying, this is the temple of the sun, or this is the temple of the moon. How do you know that? Well, there is symbology, etched into the stone.
Do you see the same thing? We left out the Mayans, and I see, and I wish there was more out there. The Spanish did their best to erase the Mayan culture from history. Thankfully, a few of the codexes, I think there's four, right? 4 codexes that survived. And then we have the temple structures. But when I look at the codexes and I look at the Mayan architecture, going back to the stuff that I just showed you in Peru, you see the same stuff there.
So similar, yes.
Yeah, and
have you been to sites around Mexico?
I have,
Okay.
and I'm going to do more of it next year, for sure. But I lived in Panama.
Oh, wow, okay.
I lived in Panama for quite a while, 3 or 4 years, and so you see the Mayan culture all over there. Panama, Costa Rica, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras.
Plus the Olmecs, which I'm super fascinated with. I want to learn more about Olmec culture. because there's a huge connection possibly with the Shangdui culture of China. And this gets into some of the research that I've done around Dropa stuff, but I had never been to Mexico, and so I went in the end of March with Grandmaster of the Knights Templar Timothy Hogan,
Right.
and so we went down to Chichen Itza, Tulum, Koba, and Nakmul, and oh my God, wow! Seeing these sites firsthand, it's like going to Egypt or going to Peru. It's like, oh my God, I'm all of a sudden in a new area I've never been in before, and so my eyes were open. Chichen Itza is such a huge site, unbelievably. Tulum, sadly, there were so many tourists there that we couldn't get around to a lot of spots. But Tim took us around to the back, past it's past the observatory, the only building there that's round. There's a temple way in the back. There's a bunch of bees buzzing around it, stinging everybody. But there's elephant glyphs on the side of this temple, and it's quite fascinating because there are elephants in South America, Central America. No. When was the last time there were mammoths? Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
right. That's what comes to mind first, right? If
Yeah,
it wasn't India, then or Africa, then it would be mammoths, and any one of those is friggin' significant.
so you walk around the other side of the building, and there's another temple, and sitting up over the lintel, as you were showing me from your Peru photos, sitting up over the lintel is this character sitting in lotus position.
Hmm.
Okay. Here I
Right.
am at Chichen Itza looking at Hindu glyphs. This is kind of bizarre. So this is why there, to me, is this connection, this world culture connection. Walter Bosley talks a lot about it, the calm culture, which is interesting because in my own research with Buddhist culture, mysticism, and central China now, but Far Eastern calm Tibet, there is this connection with the calm people all the way from Kemet across Asia and possibly to the New World. And so,
What?
who are the Olmecs? What is the Olmec culture? Why is there a connection with Hindus with the Mayans? There's obviously a Templar connection as well that predates any of the Spaniards coming over. So what is going on? There obviously was some sort of interworld connection in the past. That's what I'm going
Yeah,
with
well, you look at the Olmec faces and you go, okay. Are they representing themselves or are they representing something that they saw? Right? I don't know. Both are intriguing. Both ideas are intriguing. And again, it's a culture that we know absolutely nothing about.
Bingo.
Nothing.
Yeah, seriously.
We know nothing about what's going on there. And going back to the Mayans for a second. So the observatory that you're referring to,
I have photos of myself in front of it. I'm like,
is
oh my God, this place is wow.
But it is an observatory. There
Yes.
isn't another way to look at it, is there? I mean, when you see it,
and I can't remember what exactly it's looking at. In the night sky, there's a specific constellation that it's looking at, and so that to me is interesting, especially when you talk about Shabolba. And so Shabolba and Shambhala are very interesting because Shabolba is the underworld for the Mayans, where Shambhala is the underworld for the Buddhists. Okay, but oftentimes Shabolba is represented as a stellar nursery underneath the belt stars of Orion. And so that's interesting because if you follow Orion down to the horizon, basically that's where you find Sirius. And so there's this connection to Shabalba, Orion, Sirius within this. It's a stellar nursery. If you've ever seen the OMSI Hubble movie, you should watch it.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a great movie
with Leonardo DiCaprio. Okay.
Yeah.
They talk about this stellar nursery. So this is what the ancient Mayans called Shambhala. How did they know it was there? Right?
Well, so when you go and you look at the Temple of the Sun Temple, and the Temple of the Moon in Mexico City, you look at the Mayan cultures. You go down to Peru, you see what's going on there. I can even mention Chaco Canyon right here in North America too, as well.
Right.
But you swing over to Mesopotamia and Egypt, and you see the similarities of everything. It's not just right. It's like the construction, the ideas, the math, the engineering, the quarrying, the construction techniques are too similar. And it seems to me, Hans, that they had one teacher. Right. Somebody was sharing this information. You talk about Atlantis being a time period. And the ideas behind Gilgamesh, and of course the origin stories of Egypt, all talk about this. That they came and taught
Well, in
us.
Egypt, they called it what? Zep Tepi, the first
Zep
time,
Tepi.
right? Yeah.
Right. Do you think that that's ultimately what we're looking at? Because again, you go to Chichen Itza, and then you go to Mexico City, and then you go over to Egypt and China, by the way, right? You're seeing the same construction techniques going down. And if it's the only other idea here is that it's part of our DNA, that we were going to go through evolution.
Look at what we build today. Look at our cities of today. Look at our cities, 100 years ago around the world. Everybody's launching this to some sort of Tartarian aspect, but just look at the architecture, and it's like we have the same master architect teaching the same styles across the world, and we see that with even our shitty architecture of today. I mean, neighborhoods look the same everywhere.
Well,
Depending on the building materials, for sure.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's so easy to shoot down skeptics today and debunkers when it comes to this, because no, this is what was going. You're not giving enough credit to Stone Age man. This is what was happening. And wait a minute, explain Göbekli Tepe then.
Seriously, you would need a civilization, water, food,
7,000 years before
some
Giza
sort of
and
mastery of astrology, architecture, and stonemasonry. No, it's hunter and gatherers. They just came out of nowhere and built this site. Are you kidding? Are you kidding me?
How do you explain Göbekli Tepe?
I don't know, because Karen Tepe is older, and so this is even more interesting. It's like, okay, what was going on in this region? Was it actually buried by us, by the people living there at the time, or was this part of the if the Halcyon Comet impact event happened, a lot of it splashed down on the Mediterranean, and so some of it spilled up and over into Egypt, which was all jungle at that point, and created the Ur Nile, and now what is the underground water aquifer between Libya and Egypt. It's a long story there. Don't want to get into it. But you also have the same idea going around the rest of the Mediterranean. And so if the floodwaters flushed up and over into Turkey, would it have buried that entire site in oceanic rubble and stone? Or was this something that, we did? Mankind, we buried it on purpose. And so that's the two-sided question there, two sides of that coin.
Yeah, I am going to show you an image right now. This is hot out of Turkey. Okay, this is like in the now. All right, so, and like I said, I just see this stuff everywhere. And this is a site right around Karahan Tepe, in between Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. But are you ready? This is a dwelling, and this
Give
is this is 8,000 years old. Okay, all right. Now I need everybody to be sitting down. You need to be sitting down. Are you sitting down? Here you go. Bam. Somebody just explain that to me.
Hugh Newman, actually, I think.
Yeah. That's from Hugh Newman. Yeah.
Dude, it's a T-cut doorway. What the F?
Friggin' Hugh Newman, man, posted that, and I just had to share this with everybody.
This is in Darren Kuya, or
yeah.
Oh my God.
No, it's in
the
another
underground
town.
city.
Yeah, it's another town next to that. Yeah, and so, but yeah, he just posted this yesterday, I think, or the day before.
Seriously, wow.
And I see, I can't. Once I, and I just presented this to you and everybody else, and of course Jason and I worked on that book together. Once this symbolism is there, I see it everywhere.
Can't unsee it. Exactly.
Yeah. And Hugh posted this. I was like, you got to be kidding me, man. I can't get away from it. I can't get away. So this is just
this is
posted.
what we were talking about earlier. It's like, we're ingrained by these specific symbols, and we just keep seeing them over and over. And so something new is introduced to that lexicon, and oh my God, like the T shape, you see it everywhere now.
Well, it's an entrance, it's an exit. I think there's energy around it. The symbolism is powerful for the societies that were doing this, but it went on in every single country in the world. And so one would have to ask, what is the power of this? At Amaru Muru, Hans, after I did the shamanic ceremony there, with the tobacco and all the chemistry that is done, and
in Peru. Oh, really?
In Peru at Amaru Muru,
wow.
At that Stargate, whatever you want to call it. And so everybody leaves, and I'm up there by myself, and I felt this electricity start coming up through my legs and through my like buzzing, and I felt, and I was looking at my hands, right, and I'm feeling it, right. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. And I look, and there's a lady standing next to me, right, and she's doing the same thing. She's looking at her hands, and she goes, "Do you feel this?" I go, "Do I? Do you? This is what?" Right, and right there in front of that. It didn't happen during the ceremony. It happened after everybody left. But that's back to, is it ley lines? Is there something else sacred? Is it the hill? Is it the rocks? Is it the quartz?
Around where you live, don't you get those, they're like lightning balls that rip across the land, something like this?
I haven't seen that specifically. Ball lightning or spirit orbs. I haven't yet, but I've seen crazy stuff out here that is orbish, for sure. But no, I haven't seen anything dance across. There's a lot of crazy things out here in the desert and up in the mountains, but
because you get
I haven't seen.
It's like the crunching of the granite. It creates like a piezoelectric effect.
Now you go out to Joshua Tree, that's a guarantee. That's a guarantee. Yeah, that's a guarantee. Yeah, Joshua Tree, man, I don't know. And you have landers right there, and you have Giant Rock and all of the UFO legacy stories that come out of that area. But you go to Joshua Tree and just spend a night there and go outside at night. You are going to see something. It's like a guarantee. I can guarantee it. I can guarantee that you will see something crazy. I was out there, this is 10 years ago, and I rent this like cabin thing out in 29 Palms, out in the middle of the desert, in the middle of it, and throwing a little pizza party for me and like 20 friends. It's about 10 o'clock at night. Steve Murillo is out there,
Oh, really?
and
Oh, wow.
yeah. Steve is standing next to me. Alex Mistretta is there, and about 20 other friends. We're out in the patio, eating pizza and drinking beer. And somebody says, and you can't make stuff up. Somebody says, "Wouldn't it be cool, man, if we saw a UFO?" Okay, at that moment, on cue, about a quarter mile away in the middle of the desert, it's black. This white ball takes off out of the desert from the ground, right? It goes straight up and it's gone. And we're all looking at it like, no friggin' way. That on cue, right? So the next day, I go out, it was just a white ball, big white ball. No smoke, no trail, nothing. It's just gone. So the next day I wake up and I walk out there and go, man, where was that? And I was hoping I was going to see a house out there. Like I could debunk this, right? It was fire or whatever. And I walk out, there was nothing between where we were and the mountains. Nothing. I walked out there. I looked around. It's just brush, desert. Yeah. That's Joshua Tree. So yeah, it's that kind of guarantee. Just summon this.
We get some buzzy activity up at Mount Hood here. Yeah.
Well,
it's volcanic, so it's like Shasta. There's a lot of
you guys have all of
activity.
You got all of the magic up there. You have Mount Rainier.
Yeah.
You have
Adams, Helens,
yeah. And it's
sisters all the way down.
Yeah. And all of the original stuff, man, comes from up there. And Maury Island, right? Think about that. It all comes from that area. The reports, and then you can just drop in Bigfoot and go and talk about the Patterson film, and that's all in that area.
So when my father taught in the anthropology department at Washington State University in Pullman, way up in northeastern Washington, his office was next door to Grover Krantz, who was the famed Bigfoot expert. I mean, this is where we get all the original footprints from. And it was interesting because that was kind of my bonding moment with Lloyd Pye, the late Lloyd Pye, when I hung out with him, and we chatted up Bigfoot a lot. And my whole intro to him was, man, my father worked next to Grover Krantz. So, yeah.
It's funny. I get asked this all the time because I've interviewed everybody. All right, I'm not planting a flag here. Everybody knows that, but I get asked all the time. So who didn't you interview that you would? And you know what? Lloyd Pye.
You didn't interview him?
No. He died rather quickly, I might add.
Yeah, he did. It went quick. And I was so stoked to meet him. Brien Foerester hooked that up for me. So yeah, thank you, Brien. That was an amazing connection.
Yeah, and Lloyd was such a big part of. It's not only the star child skull and that aspect.
No, his whole knowledge on like crypto hominids. This whole thing was unbelievable, amazing.
And
so amazing.
The way that he would do his presentation, I watched everything that I could on Lloyd. And I gotta say, he explains it really, really well. And
yes, he does.
And you are able to just sponge it up and absorb it. And he had a really good way of presenting. His Sitchin stuff was amazing too, as well as Anunnaki stuff is great. I've stolen a bunch of it. I admit it. I think he was onto something.
It's all of our research. We can't really claim any of it's ours. It's there for all of us to research. So
yeah, yes. I never met him. Never got a chance. And he's the one that got away. Yeah, for real.
Wow.
Yeah. So what are you working on now, and where can everybody chase down your stuff?
So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I'm a graphic artist. I basically I do presentation design, logos, media marketing. I help out a lot of people in this industry, as well as every industry, pretty much. But I also do esoteric research into ancient site civilizations and occult symbology of ancient times through logos, film, media, and whatnot. Right now, I'm going to Vegas in 8 days. So I'll be there from the 17th to the 20th for Alien Event. I'll be speaking on Friday the 18th. It's like 5 o'clock to 6:30 on the Dropa Stones and ancient Buddhist cultural mysticism. And then the next morning at 9, I'll be talking about the lost mysteries of Egypt. And so, shameless plug here. Both of these are books that I've just put out. So the Dropa Stones, whoops, that's fun.
Yep.
That was my first book dealing with legends and lore around Dropa and Buddhist culture mysticism. I've also put out The Magic of Symbols. We talked a little bit about this tonight, but it gets into symbology from all around the world. And then I've just recently put out The Lost Mysteries of Kemet, the land before the Greeks. And so I'll be talking about a bit of that, where I'm getting into chematology. Obviously, got to give props to Stephen Mailer, Patricia Iwan, Layman, Yusuf Iwan, and of course, Yusuf's father, Abdel Hakim Iwan, who passed away a few years ago. And so, yeah.
And
that's
then,
what I'm doing. And then I will be at Conscious Life Expo.
It's going to be so cool, man.
With you. I'll be speaking Friday. I think it's the 7th in the Rabbit Hole Room at noon downstairs. So please come check it out. I'll be talking about the full extension of the Dropa Stones and the Dropa Mysteries there. And it's going to be exciting. That's the event.
I can't wait to break bread with you, my man. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Agreed. Put me on panels.
Hey, I can make that happen. I'll talk to you, man. Okay. All right. Behave.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for everything, Hans. Hans Dietrich, and Hans's website is posted on our website and throughout social media, and is included in the links below. So it's very easy to get to. It's megalithic.mysteries.com. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night is all brains all night long. That's what we are doing tomorrow, because Dr. Diane Hennessy is with us. Tomorrow's show, neuroscience and you. Until then, all I've got is go backly tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go backly tappy.